I've had the Panasonic Lumix s5ii Mark II for a little while now, and after taking it on paid work and running loads of tests, I finally think I've nailed the perfect settings for video in this camera. So I'm going to do a breakdown of my autofocus settings, my image settings, my custom buttons, and how I expose this camera. So less talking and let's get into it. First thing you want to do is spin your dial on top of the camera all the way around to the movie mode. That's the picture of the camera with an M, as all the settings we need will be available in here. I will show you later how to save them to custom C1, C2 and C3, but for now, the movie mode dial and hit the menu button. So the first thing we want to do is go to the camera tab and then the very top sub menu, image quality 1. Under here you'll see exposure mode. Now this wants to be into M for manual. All the others are like aperture priority and shutter priority, etc. But we don't want to use any of them. We want to be in full manual to get the best quality out of this camera. Under photo style, you want to make sure this is set to Vlog. There's many options in here. Some people like to use Cinelight D and Cinelight V2, but for me, Vlog is really easy to grade. You can just use the built-in DaVinci Resolve or Premiere, or just download the LUT from the website. You get pretty much the same thing. Don't press the select button, select down. Now under here you want to make sure that sharpness and noise reduction are both set to 0. These are something that are best done in your editing software and you don't want them to damage your footage. It's something that's unrecoverable. Not that they do, but you just want to be more cautious and do these yourself in the editing to have as much freedom as possible. Next thing I will do is I will set dual native ISO settings to auto. You can set this to low or high depending on your lighting situation, but I just like to leave it to auto so I don't make any mistakes, and it automatically does that without me having to worry about it. Syncoro Scan is something you're going to want to turn on. This is going to help you move your shutter speed in or shutter angle in really small amounts to help mitigate with the lines you get from different hertz, from different lights, sometimes sort of weird scanny lines. So yeah. Next thing on image quality 2, we have SS gain operation. For me, this one is always going to set to shutter angle. If you're a video first person, as it's just the way that things are done in video, all the other options are more photo-centric ways to operate your camera. Dropping down to the next tab, we will go to record file format. Now this one can change, but for most scenarios you want to be in MOV. This one is going to require a more powerful editing computer, as it states on the menu here, but just run some tests and make sure that you can edit the footage that the H.265 that this does, as you need a modern CPU to do that. And also MP4 can come in handy for maybe jobs or longer takes that don't necessarily you need that freedom in post-production, but for the best quality out of this camera you want to be in MOV. Now for 90% of recording, I'm going to use the 4K 25p 422 10-bit. Now if you're American, you will use the 24p, but this is the best quality I believe out of this camera. It takes a 6K sensor, a 6K image, and downscales that. It's full 422 colour and it's 10-bit. There is the 6K open gate option. This is really good if you're wanting to go to social media, to crop to vertical video. I will show on screen now how that works. For me, 90% of my stuff, unless I know I'm going to be making a reel or a TikTok out of it, I'll be shooting the 4K 25p 422 longer. I will also show you later how I'm going to set C2 and C3 up for the 60p, 50p and 100, 120 frames for the slow-mo and super slow-mo, but for now let's just build the C1 and go for the 25, 24 frames per second. Next thing you want to do on the focus tab is turn detection settings on, and under detection subject set that to human, not face and eye. If you film animals a lot, you want animals as well, but I just have it on human as I don't really film animals. So face and eye is weird and broke. Panasonic needs to fix that. So yeah, just have this set to human. It still uses face and eye, but if it can't find an eye, it will just detect the whole human body and still stick on the person. So yeah, keep this with human. If you click on autofocus custom settings video and then drop down to set, this lets you set your speed. Personally, I like to go with a +2 on autofocus speed and a +1 on sensitivity. You can tweak these yourself, but this is a good starting point. Different scenarios do require different sets, but for me this is where I leave it for most of the time. Continuous autofocus mode wants to be on 2 always. 1 is just pointless, I don't know anyone would use it. Number 2 is going to always be focusing, when mode number 1 only focuses when the camera is recording. but that's a terrible idea. So I'll get this on mode 2. Now down to the last tab under camera settings, the one titled others. Let's drop to image stabilization. Now for this, you want to be in just normal with the in-body stabilization, so just make sure that's selected on that. We will set custom buttons to these later, so for now just leave them off or as they are, and later on I'm going to show you how to map these to turn them on and off on the fly. Now we're down to the cog tab. Auto white balance locking setting. This is something I use, but again I map this to a button later on, so for now let's leave that. Next, come down to focus/shutter, and on page 2 you want to come down to assign record to shutter button. I have this on just because sometimes as habit from old cameras I will press the shutter button, the one used to take photos, etc. Under monitor and display video, which is the 5th tab down under the cog icon, come to Vlog View Assist. Make sure it's set to Vlog 709, that comes built in the camera. Make sure it's turned on for monitor and HDMI output. That will just show you a base grade. Applies the LUT, does not record it, so you can still get the vlog image in editing, but just to view as you're recording, this is a must, so get that turned on. Coming down from that, we will go to red record frame indicator. Again, this is a massive one. Make sure this gets turned on. It comes off, it just puts a red ring around the whole of the screen to let you know you're recording. It's really easy to see that from far away. This feature can really start to make some serious mistakes, so definitely put that one on. Going down to the last tab under the gear icon, focus ring control, set that to linear, as that's going to be the most repeatable motion for when you manual focus on this camera. If lens focus button setting, this is if you have a button on your lens. I'm using the 2470 Sigma Art lens, what does have a button, so I can choose what that button does. I've got this set to AF lock. If the autofocus is being a bit jittery or moving from person to another person I don't want, I'll just hit the button on the lens to lock it on the subject. Now it's down to the spanner icon. Under double card slot functionality, I have mine onto relay recording. If you're shooting something really important, like a wedding or something, it's good to maybe have 2 SD cards in there and shoot to both. You can also separate photo and videos onto each card if you've got 2 in there. But for me, most of the time I'm just relay recording to get longer, just so it don't disturb me as I'm shooting throughout the day. It just moves on to the next card. And if you want to know what SD cards I use, it's this one's on screen now, as you can see. I will link them in the description below if you want to check them out. They work perfect in every single record format with this camera, and they're relatively affordable. Under thermal management, the camera comes on standard. You need to set this to high, as it's just kind of over precautious things. The camera will get a bit warm, but yeah, I don't think you'd ever see any issues with setting this to high. And it unlocks past the 30-minute record limit the camera sets in standard, so yeah, changing this gives you unlimited record time till your battery dies or your card's full. Monitor frame rates I set to 60. Some people think this looks weird, but I don't really worry about that too much. I have 120 in my viewfinder. Next thing is monitor backlit. This comes set to auto. What I'm sure is great for photos, but for video you don't want the brightness of your screen constantly changing, as that can make you mess up your exposure, thinking shot's brighter or darker than it actually is. I like mine on +1. I've run loads of tests and +1 seems to be the right one for me. So I'll give a try on +1. If you feel like you're struggling to see it in outside brighter areas, then you can always knock that up. But just make sure that it's set not to auto and it's to whichever one you prefer. Under eye sensor, I change this sensitivity to low, as it can be annoying. It's the sensor that detects your eye gun of the viewfinder to swap screens. You can also, there's a button on the body that allows you to do this manually, what I use more often than not. Under the in and out one section, I come to beep and I turn all these off. I have everything off. I don't like my camera making any noises. So everything, the beep volume, the AF beep volume and the E-shut volume, I just kill all the sounds. Right, so let's get into some custom buttons. Drop down to the gear icon, then to the 3rd tab down called operations. You're going to want to go to FN button set. Click that, then click settings in rec mode, and in here you can map any of your function buttons or customizable buttons on your camera body. So let's go through what I have. Starting, I just leave this one as is. This is the autofocus settings, so I just leave this as labeled as the camera comes. Second one down Second one down, again, this is to change between your autofocus settings if anything's ever been weird. So again, I'd leave this one. Third one down, again, this is to switch between your monitor and viewfinder on automatic. This cycles through. So it will go monitor on, viewfinder off, viewfinder on, monitor off, or both on with the automatic sensor. You can choose these on the fly. The Q is to get to your quick menu. So I'd leave this as is also. The first thing I change is function button 1, which I will have to E-stabilization. This is the stabilization what takes it above the in-body one, where it crops in on the image. So I just have a button to turn this on and off on the fly. If I ever need to go handheld in a rush and feel like my shots are too shaky, I'll just hit this button, switch this on, then as soon as I'm back on tripod or gimbal, I'll turn it back off. I leave the white balance button as is. This one's an important one for me. The ISO button, I change to luminance spot meter. In a sec, I'm going to get into a little guide on how I expose this camera using this tool, so make sure you stick around to watch that part. The third button along the top next to ISO, I change to auto white balance lock. Now this is what I talked about recently. What this does is, if you move from one location to another, this allows you to keep your white balance the same. The auto white balance will pick the temperature it likes, then you lock that. So when it comes to the color grade, or you don't get inconsistent shots for an interview or anything like that. So yeah, it's a really useful tool. Once you get into the workflow using this, it's great. You just let the auto white balance move around. Once you like the way it looks, lock that in. I'll leave the record button as record. Onto the next page. On the side of the touchscreen, if you swipe out, there is a menu in there. I don't touch this, I don't personally use it, but if you have some settings that you use now and then, you could put them in here, but I don't use any of these. This is just how the camera comes. This one's another important one for me. This is the button on the front of the body. Now this one I have set to audio levels. I have this so I can just hit it on the fly and turn my mic gain up and down. The microphone of choice I use is DFV Mic D4. I love this mic for this camera, it's such a great pair. The mic is so full of features and so convenient, I could do a whole video just on that, but yeah, links in the description to grab that. Getting on to page 3. Now this is the arrows, directional arrows at the side of the menu button on the wheel. Now for this, I will have each direction to be a different on-screen overlay. So I know how to quickly turn on and off if I want a clean image. So I start with pressing up. I will set to zebra pattern. Now I have this set to zebra 2. And if you go into your settings and set your zebras to 95, you can use this to quickly check see if windows are overexposed or a sky, just by hitting it on and off, see if the zebras flick on. So yeah, I have up set to zebras. I have right set to waveform. That's just the way I like to expose. I'm sure you've all seen a waveform before. Press this, it puts me a little waveform in the corner. Sometimes I should refer to that. Down I have for peaking. If I ever need to go to manual autofocus because something weird is happening, I would just slide across the manual focus, press down so my peaking's on, and that's as simple as that. I can just adjust it manually. Left is my level gauge. Now this I think comes already on the camera, but it can get quite annoying and in the way. It's also really useful. So I just will put this on for balancing a tripod to make sure my shot's level, then quickly switch it off. And that is how I have my custom buttons. Really simple, but really efficient. I like to be really fast and on the fly. I like to turn things on and off really quick. So yeah, that's how I'm set up. Right, so now you have all your settings changed and set. What you want to do is come down to the spanner icon and then down to the gear icon called settings. And you will find save to custom mode. Press this and you will see C1, C2 and C3. Now, for my normal 4K, 422, 25 or 24 frames per second, I will put that on C1. And then as simple as that, that's complete. Now, on the top of your camera, your dial named C1 will load the settings, all these settings you have just set. Now, for C2, we will jump back up to record quality, and we will push that up to 4K 50p. Now this is going to put us into APS-C as this camera has a crop in 4K 50. But once you've done that, all the other settings can stay the same. We're on shutter angle, so that remains at 180. And we come back down to the spanner icon, back down to settings, save custom mode, but this time we go on 2. And you have a C3 that you can do the same again. I set this to 120 FPS. just some super slow-mo, or you could set it to 6K open gate if you do a lot of social media stuff. Either way, just this is how you save the custom modes and tailor your camera setup to make you fast as possible. Just going to show you the best way to expose with this camera, the way I find the most best for me. Now as you've just seen, we've mapped the ISO button to the exposure spot tool. Now this puts a little square box anywhere on your display. As you can see, it's currently just over the fake plant. You can move it around with a touch screen. Now if you just leave it there for 1 second, you can see across the bottom of the screen it says 0.6 underexposed. So wherever this square box is, it's going to give you the exact exposure of that square. So if we move it to the window at the back of this room, you can now see that's 4.7 stops overexposed. Now using this exposure spot index, we can put people's faces and skin tones perfectly in exposure. We can quickly check overexposed areas. Like at the back, we can turn our zebras on enough to also do that. We can also go over the TV and see that that's 5.3 stops underexposed. And this is where you can really learn the dynamic range of the camera. I'm going to link in the description a video from Lumix themselves, what is excellent, explaining the maximum you can go for you clip the shadows and the maximum you can go for you clip the highlights. Once you learn these numbers, you will be fine in any situation just to quickly find what is in exposure, what isn't, if anything's too dark or if anything's too bright. That's a breakdown of how I use my S5 Mark II. The best thing to do is to take these settings and custom buttons and take them and test them out for yourself. Use them with your workflow and the way you like to work, because everyone's shoot style is slightly different. The amazing part with this camera is really easy to change custom buttons by just doing the long press, so it should have no problems in moving on the fly. I'm currently working on a full review for this camera and it should be out real soon on the channel. But until then, if you want to find out the massive problem I had with this camera when I first got it, click here.